All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio. Today is Monday, May the 20th, 2024, and we got our guest with us tonight. But before we bring him on, I want to welcome our co-host, Gary Kendrick. How are you doing tonight, Gary?
Pretty good, Billy. How is everybody this evening? Glad to be here.
Uh,
I'd like to make a little shout out to my nephew and my niece, Emmy and Maddox. Let's get squatchy.
That's it. And then, of course, our guest tonight, Henry May, which we should be able to hear him tonight. How you doing, Henry?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
All right, great. We can hear you loud and clear. Much better than last time.
Amen.
So anyway, a big shout out to everybody that's in the chat so far. We've got Buttworm in there, Brian Corbin. Oh, let's see. We got Kevin Harder in there. We got Tennessee, Cherokee in there.
Sean Forker.
Oh, Sean, I didn't even say where to go.
There's Fort Chop.
There he is. There he is.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining in. And then, of course, we got a few on here that's not in the chat. But anyway. So, Henry, we're so glad you could come back and get you back rescheduled on the show. I know that Gary has been itching to ask you some questions because he's probably got a notebook sitting on his desk of questions that he wants to ask you.
If I can read
your scribble. Can you read your scribble? So, Henry, is there anything you'd like to talk about before we start asking you questions?
No, well, actually, there is one thing. There is, as Columbo would say, there is just one thing.
All right.
There is this audio that's been released today, supposedly of Bob Gimlin confessing to the hoax.
Oh, really?
There's some Gimlin film. Yeah, it's pretty clearly AI, however.
Yeah, I figured as much. You know, it's going to be so hard to trust any audio and video nowadays.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that just makes it harder for people that's out trying to do, an honest investigation.
Yep.
Really, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Well, Henry, if you don't care, I'm going to try to get started here. You have been called the Bigfoot Encyclopedia and a true Bigfoot historian. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I do a lot of reading of Sasquatch books, and I enjoy that. And I guess I'm kind of like a sponge. I guess I've just kind of absorbed some of that knowledge. So, I suppose if you want to call me the Bigfoot Encyclopedia, that's fine. But I'm very humble about it. Let's say I prefer to just be me.
I'm just going to be honest with you. I watched a little bit of Steve's show the other night when you were on there. And you said at one point that you probably read close to 300 Bigfoot books.
At least, yes.
That is phenomenal. I didn't know there was 300 Bigfoot books out there.
There are many books. A lot of the books that I have are probably older than me.
Yeah. Yeah, I seen you're pretty close to my age too, so that's getting up there.
Yeah, I just turned 54 back in March.
Yeah, okay. I'll be 55 in December.
Nice.
Oh, that makes me the oldest man here. I'm 55 already.
If you don't care, Henry, I saw a post that you made the other day about the Skookum Cast. Are you pretty familiar with the Skookum Cast?
Yes, I am, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think it's an elk.
That's what I was going to ask. Smart man right there.
And the reason I think it's an elk is because why would a primate go out into a muddy area without walking out into it and going out and picking up the apples and the fruit that was there? Why would it lay on its side and decide to try and wriggle its way over to the fruit? Now, I realize gorillas have been filmed doing that in zoos, but that's in zoos.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty safe environment for them. A wild primate would not do that, I don't believe, out in the wild. Besides, this mud wallow
Excuse me.
where this occurred was right close to a road. So anything could have seen it. Anybody could have seen it.
Yep.
I know I've seen several things where they talk about there's one part of the cast, one half of the cast, that even the people that discovered it says, hey, that's an elk.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, where it was done at, it was probably late in the season, and that was probably the only wet spot left, and elk will wallow. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think it could very well be elk.
Yeah.
Henry, what do you think is your best report or sighting? And have you had a sighting yourself?
I had a sighting in 1998, and it was of a white Sasquatch. And I was coming home one night on Highway 61, heading north, about 10 miles from here. Saw an individual cross the road about 150 yards in front of me. Didn't think much about it. My first thought was, okay, is somebody messing around out here? Is there a human? Is there somebody walking across the road and messing around? Well, I got to the point to where it crossed the road. I saw this thing sitting on the right-hand side of the road, and it stood there in a ditch. Never looked at me, never saw the face, and it was massive. It was pretty muscular. I could see muscles in its back as I passed it. And that was 26 years ago. That was in January '98.
They definitely leave an impression.
As far as my best report, I got a report from a fellow up in northern Mississippi back around 2005, or maybe it was 2006. Can't remember exactly when. But he had an interesting sighting. It wasn't just him. There were others with him.
Mm-hmm.
It was close. It was not too far from a waterway, which goes into the theory of how Sasquatch hang around water sources.
Mm-hmm. That's been a theory of mine for a long time, that they can't stray far from a steady source of water.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be a weird one, and I'm going to explain it a little bit. Animal, mineral, or vegetable? Do you think Sasquatch is animal, which is a natural being, mineral, some kind of interdimensional being, alien, whatever, or vegetable, some type of supernatural?
Oh, definitely animal, definitely flesh and blood. Not supernatural, not alien or anything like that. No, I don't think so. But we don't know for sure. We don't really know. The day may come when we do know, but we don't know right now.
Yeah, I agree. I've been an animal guy for a long time, and I flip flop back and forth between, is it a hominid? Is it some type of relic primate, or whatever? It's hard, but the interdimensional thing. I know Ron Moorhead's pretty big into the quantum Sasquatch, I think is what he calls it. Mm-hmm. And I have a hard time if something is interdimensional, where it can step between dimensions. Why is it that we find trace evidence like footprints, handprints, feces, things like that? If it's an interdimensional being, wouldn't it be able just to blank out and leave and not leave any trace?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Good
yeah,
point.
I'm definitely an animal guy.
Yeah.
I'm definitely an animal guy. Henry, what got you started into investigation? And when did you start into investigation?
That goes back to 1976. I'd seen an episode of, and I'm sure you guys probably remember it, The $6 Million Man, with the bionic Bigfoot, played by the late Andre the Giant.
Amen.
Yep.
And I'll never forget the eyes, the white contacts they had him wear.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. And then I saw my
played a good
father. Yeah, he did. And then I saw my father with a book called Bigfoot the Mysterious Monster, which was also a documentary movie. And I was intrigued. I said, "What the heck is Bigfoot?" I had no idea. I just, yeah, I see. As I mentioned 2 weeks ago, I do have a vague memory of when I was young, a little bit younger, seeing the old Monsters, Mysteries, or Myths documentary with Rod Serling.
And I can remember back in the 70s with Leonard Nimoy, The In Search Of.
Oh, In Search Of, yes, that was classic as well.
That was the first time I ever heard the Sierra sounds, and that was probably in the late 70s.
Yeah.
I was a little dude back then, but I've kind of always been fascinated with it. But yeah, there's a lot of good shows back then. A lot of good shows back then.
Squatch Talk wants to know, Henry. I'm assuming he's agreeing to Flesh and Blood, but do you want to take a guess at the population?
Oh gosh! And the thing is, nobody knows what the population of Sasquatch are. Nobody.
Right.
I got news for you. There may be speculation. There may be individuals who make claims, but they can't back them up. They can't back those claims up. As far as population, there would have to be a pretty viable breeding population of them. Otherwise, they would have gone extinct a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As to the population, and I'm only taking a flying guess, I would say there's probably about, and there may be even less than this. There may be, across the entire United States, there may be a minimum of 10,000. Might be more, might be less. We really don't know.
Yeah.
I had read somewhere one time where they speculated that there would have to be at least 5,000 in the continental United States to have a breeding population.
Mm-hmm. By the way, hello to Robin. Good to see you. Hello, you and JC.
Yep.
This is going to be kind of an interesting question. I know you're from way down south down there in Mississippi. What type of habitat in Mississippi do you believe Sasquatch goes to?
Well, I think that they hang around water sources again. I believe that they do hang around the rivers, Mississippi River. There's also the Delta National Forest down south of here. There's lots of forested areas where they could live and thrive. I think, as long as they have three things: food, water, and cover.
Mm-hmm. I know one of my big things is science said at one point that there was not enough food to support a large primate in the forests of the United States. But still yet, we had Native Americans that lived here for thousands of years before the first white man ever showed up, and they lived off of what was in the forest.
And think about this, don't bears live in the forests? Yes, they do. What do they live off of?
The same food sources.
Mm-hmm.
We've got actually starting to build up a good bear population here where I'm at. Billy's eat up with them.
Yeah, I am.
We had our first incident last night, or not last night, a couple nights ago. A bear stole a bag of our trash out of the trash can and went behind my building. And I heard some racket. It was probably about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I went outside to see what was going on. And I was looking around, and I knew something was up when my dog wouldn't go outside. So I was looking around trying to figure out what was going on, and it huffed at me. It kind of grunted. And I looked down, and all I had was just a little .22 pistol in my hand. So I come back in the house and got a bigger gun and a better flashlight. But yeah, I agree with that. Black bear population, I think, is pretty It's right along the same lines. And if you can support a good bear population, I think Sasquatch wouldn't have any trouble because they're a little bit more, I believe, cunning than a bear is. My own personal opinion.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting statistic right there. 600,000 black bear in North America. That's not surprising.
Mm-mm. No.
Well, I tell you what, boy, we better watch out then, because didn't Meldrum say that there could be what did he say, one squatch to every two bears? We could be in trouble.
Yeah. Matter of fact, he used that same math somewhere I saw the other night. But it was on your show. It was on the show.
Yeah.
One squatch for every so many bears.
Right.
Yeah. We could be in trouble. That's a
well,
lot.
I look at it like this, Gary. You could have had a bad situation. Depending on where that thing was at when you walked out there. But now that he knows you got trash there, guess what?
He'll be back.
He'll be back.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I'm awaiting. I'm awaiting. I'm like I told you before, I'm a little bit older and a whole lot better armed now.
Gary be eating some bear steak here in the next year or so.
Boy, you got to be careful with that. That can be rough. I'll tell you that now. Henry, I know you do a lot of conferences and stuff. Go to a lot of conferences and festivals. What do you think is your favorite Sasquatch festival or conference?
Well, it begins and ends with the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, which is the oldest, the longest running event that there is. Started back in 1989 by Don Keating, and it has grown. And it was he handed the reins over to Mark DeWorth back in 2012, and Mark DeWorth has taken it and just run with it.
Yep.
Oh yeah, it's exploded. It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask about, and I'm sure you probably know about this, living in Mississippi. I'd read somewhere that one of the very first Bigfoot reports came out of a place called Natchez. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, Mississippi.
Yes. And this is one that I'm fascinated by. This happened in 1721. Supposedly there was a strange noise heard. And the Frenchman who reported this thought, well, it's probably a more mundane creature or something like that. It's probably a wolf or something. Nobody knew what Sasquatch was back then. Not 1721, but that may indeed be the oldest report of a Sasquatch in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, with that being, from the 1700s, which kind of leads me to believe that you are kind of the Bigfoot historian. Can you tell me a little bit about what you might think about Albert Otzman's story?
Oh, very interesting. I believe I discussed this on Squatch TV also. The Albert Otzman story, it seems almost too good to be true.
Yeah.
But he recounted things that, and he gave details that were not well known and not generally well researched back in 1957 when he finally came forward with his account. He gave details about primate anatomy and things of that nature. The only thing that I am a bit dubious of when it comes to the Otzman story is the fact that he said they had woven blankets.
I know one part of the story that always throws me for a loop is the way he recounted it. It almost sounds like that he might have been trying to escape with the young female.
I never heard that. I never read that in any of the books. He never tried to escape with a young female.
No, I don't think he did. I think he was trying to, because he constantly talks about the young female. And that's, I think it happened, 1924 was his original
24.
Yep.
100 years ago. Yeah.
And, back in 1924, things were a lot different, even between that and 1957 when he come out with it.
Mm-hmm.
News media and things like that, which kind of segues into the next thing that I want to ask you. You was talking about Sasquatch not being very well known, and it happens around here a lot. Especially down south. I know in Mississippi and places like that, sometimes they'll call it it's a booger. Have you ever heard that term?
Right.
That term's used around here a whole lot too. We actually have a restaurant now called the Wood Booger in Middle Virginia. But terms being thrown around like that, booger, and I've heard it called no necks. And seems like every little thing, people didn't really necessarily say, oh, it was Bigfoot, it was Sasquatch, it was the Grass Man, or anything like, that we talk about now. They refer to things like, I've heard it called no neck, Chicken Man.
Mm-hmm.
Something about the way it kind of jerked when it was walking. They called it the Chicken Man. Seems like every little town has its own different name for it. And when you go and ask about Sasquatch, I said, no, I've never seen a Sasquatch. Now, there was a booger down in the field down here one time.
Right.
Yeah. And, when they describe what the booger looked like, that's where it comes in at.
Yeah.
So is there any other unusual names for Sasquatch that you've heard of?
Well, the ones that you hear down here in the South are like Booger and Wild Man. Trying to think. I know there's many others.
Skunk Ape.
Yeah.
Skunk Ape, exactly. Down in Florida.
Yep.
Willie Booger.
Oh, yeah.
That's another one.
Yep.
There's so many of them, especially down here in the South. But you think about this, before 1958, before the name Bigfoot came along, that was the only thing people could call these things. Well, I mean, in Canada, they were calling them Sasquatch in Canada, but that was only because J.W. Burns anglicized the word Sasketch, which was a Chehalis Indian word.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I can't remember where skookum comes from, but I'm pretty sure it had a lot to do with fur trading and things up and down the West Coast. Because if you look from like Canada all the way down into California, you see places like Skookum Meadows, Skookum Pond, Skookum Lake, Skookum Forest.
Yes, and there's also place names like Devil and Devil this, Devil that.
Yep.
Yeah,
that was another thing Sasquatch were called was Devil.
Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, since you mentioned that, Henry, that was one of the reasons that William Dranginnis had bought that property up in West Virginia, because there was a valley right there next to the property he bought called Devil's Hole.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew that it probably got a name for a reason.
See, we have the Devil's Bathtub up on High Knob here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the Cherokee words for Sasquatch is the Sukaloo. And it's not talked about very much among natives because it's kind of a touch and go type of thing. Mm. But a lot of people translate that as the Cherokee Devil, is what they call it. So, there's a lot of names that come in and out with it.
The Squatch Talk was saying that Osterman's story was debunked on Cliff and Bobo's show. I'm going to have
to listen to that episode because I know that was John Kirk that mentioned that.
Yeah, yeah.
I kind of agree with Henry. There was a lot of information that he put out.
A lot.
And, it all sounds relatively similar to what you hear today.
Yeah.
And, like I said, that was over 100 years ago when, you think nobody talks about it now, but imagine what it was 100 years ago.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Let me go through my list here, make sure I've hit everything. You'll hear, and this kind of plays in true because we talked about this a little bit before the show. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. Have been my whole life. From the first time it come out, and I know Henry's interested in Star Wars, and Billy's interested in Star Wars. you hear a lot of references to Sasquatch. They say it looks like Chewbacca.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on sightings where they mention that it looks like Chewbacca?
I'm not surprised. Not surprised. I mean, if that's the only frame of reference they have. And think about this. I know that Chewbacca was based on Sasquatch. The look of Chewbacca, you can just tell just by looking at it. Of course, the only thing is, we don't know if Sasquatch actually can pilot a spaceship. I don't believe they can.
Yeah, we'll start calling them Wookiees.
Yeah, if they do, you see one jump out of the Millennium Falcon, somebody let me know.
I mean, you just look at Chewbacca, you look at descriptions of Sasquatch, basically the same, except for the dog face.
Yeah, which I think Lucas based that on the dog that he had.
Right, that part was based on George Lucas's dog.
Yeah.
But I mean, the similarities are, there's even one part where Han Solo says, I wouldn't make him mad. He can rip your arms off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very viable description of Sasquatch as far as I'm concerned. He can rip your arms off.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, are we ready to play Henry's songs?
Absolutely.
I know we heard them. We heard them once, but I don't know. Henry, did you get the chance to listen to them?
No. I guess I can hear them again.
Yeah, you're going to hear them now. So
okay.
We're going to start with Gary's favorite, the country version.
That's right.
There we go.
Well, old Henry May from Mississippi, he's a man on a mission, got his eyes on a legend, spending his days and nights neath its southern moon, researching Sasquatch like it's his little canoe. He's got his maps and his cameras, the whole 9 yards, trekking through the backwoods, searching them swamps so hard. With a heart full of passion and a pocket full of dreams, he's got Sasquatch on his mind, so it seems. Through the hills and valleys, he roams alone, taking notes and making casts of footprints. Unknown folks in town think he's out there just plain crazy, but old Henry knows there's more to this story, yes maybe.
What did you think about that one, Henry?
Okay.
I'm going to be honest. That's a dandy. That brings back some of the old Alabama vibes from back in the day.
What kind of music do you like, Henry?
Oh, I like all kinds.
Do you?
Yeah.
All right. Well, here comes the alternative pop version.
Mm-hmm.
Henry May from Mississippi, on a quest for Sasquatch mystery, through the forest day and night, with his flashlight shining bright, climbing the mountains, searching high, looking for footprints in the sky. In his tent, he stays awake, listening for the creatures quake. Henry's got his camera ready, capturing evidence. He's always steady through the swamps and muddy ground, traces of the Sasquatch he's found. Yes, found. Capturing evidence, he's always steady through the swamps and muddy ground, traces of the Sasquatch
So where'd you put that Sasquatch? You got him in a freezer?
No.
And if you do, don't tell anybody.
Right.
Uh,
There'll be more suits show up there than you'd want to think about. Billy, I've got one more thing if you don't care.
I'll go right ahead.
Henry, you're a man of many talents, and you, like I said, you have read probably 300 books. For somebody who's just getting started or is just interested in the subject, what do you think would be one of the best books that they could read?
anything by John Green. Anything by John Green, in my opinion. Best, of course, is Sasquatch Names Among Us. Also, anything by Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Dr. John Bindernagel, Dr. Grover Krantz. I even recommend the skeptical books, such as by Brian Regal, Michael McLeod, Joshua Blue Booze. There's one is by Jean Quasar, which examines the possibility that Sasquatch look like a large version of a spider monkey. Don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but it's an interesting take on the subject. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I can't remember where I read it at, and my memory's not great. That's why I'm amazed that you can recall as much stuff as you do. But I'd read something somewhere that somebody had thought that some type of extinct lemur may be in the bloodline of Sasquatch.
Oh, that was from the Ketchum study, the Melba Ketchum study.
That's right. That's right.
And
I have a hard.
Personally, if you read Haskell Hart's excellent book about the Sasquatch Genome Project, you'll see where she made all kinds of mistakes on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was controversial there for a long time.
Yep.
For sure.
I honestly think that they were onto something. I think the way they went about it was flawed. But somewhere down the line, I do think that, there's human DNA in the mix. There's a lot of Native American stories. I'm part Native American, and I do my fair share of Native research. But there are a lot of stories, Shawnee Indian tribe, Cherokee Indian tribe. There's even some from the Chehalis Indians, the Chinook Indians up in Washington, that Sasquatch would steal women for breeding purposes. And they would have basically children that were half Bigfoot and half human.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Oh, also, I recommend any books by Christopher L. Murphy as well. I do recommend those.
Yeah, Chris Murphy. Yeah.
Well, Billy, I think that's all that I've got. Henry, you are quite the individual, brother. I'm going to tell you that now. That is amazing how much research you have actually done. Amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I'm thoroughly impressed.
As long as you've been in this, Henry, I got to know, who would you consider your mentors?
Oh, man.
Oh, definitely John Green. Let's see. Well, the Four Horsemen of Sasquatchery, definitely.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I figured you would say.
I guess in modern day it'd be Thomas Steenberg, because his mantra, and I think it should be adopted by every Bigfoot researcher, stick to the facts and never deviate from the facts.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. That's true. I think one of my favorite modern would have to be John Bindernagel. He was incredibly polite.
He was great.
He was really a great man. And I like the way he never argued with anybody. He would always say, you could be right. And that was his way out of an argument.
Right.
That's what he used. Yeah, you could be right.
Yeah. So Henry, you've got all this knowledge that you've gathered from all the books that you've read, and you've had plenty of time now to think about this, what do you think it's going to take to bring proof of the existence of this animal?
Well, I think it's going to take a body or a piece of a body. Nothing else will be accepted.
Definitely not video, definitely not photos.
Not DNA, because that's what he's seen with the Ketchum study, and later with the Sykes study. The Sykes study wasn't necessarily that much better than. It was a little bit better than the Ketchum study, but that's not really saying much.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
because
Sykes study was just as.
Didn't that end up being a bear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Although, if I'm not mistaken, it was a bear that was it a bear that they thought was almost extinct?
They did. It was a ancient polar bear, giant polar bear.
This was from the Yeti Project, right?
Uh-huh.
I think I read something on that. They actually matched up that DNA sample with a divergent species of brown bear that became polar bears. And it had, the one that they matched it with, the DNA, had died, I think, 10,000 years ago.
Yeah. So what does that tell you?
Yeah.
There's
There's
still
a term
things out there.
There's a term I'm trying to, and everybody burns it up too because they talk about the Lazarus taxon, a species that they thought was once extinct, but now there's evidence that it is not. And everybody uses the coelacanth, and I've used the coelacanth myself, and I kind of feel bad for it now because it gets burned up. Everybody uses that. The coelacanth was thought to be extinct until they found them off the coast of Africa. So, and I'm sure there's other things that are out there that we thought probably been dead a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So Henry, you've been doing this for the better part of over 30 years. Do you think this discovery is going to happen in our lifetime?
I hope so, but I'm not sure. With all the infighting that we have in this community and all the hoaxing and things of that nature, it's like Thomas Seaberg says, it's like the inmates running the asylum a lot of time.
Yeah. All right, let's see here. Kevin Harder just put something up here. The mitochondrial gene flow, mitochondrial integration can preserve the mitogenome of an extinct species and a related species.
Huh. Wow.
Well, Kevin, I'll be the first to admit to you that I would almost need Dr. Meldrum or somebody to give that to me in some kind of explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's genetics has never been my high point.
Mine either.
With that being said, one of the things that I'm really fascinated with, and I don't know if Billy or you and Henry has ever heard of it, Ötzi the Iceman.
Mm-hmm.
He died, I think, 5,000 years ago, 5,500 years ago, something like that. And when they did DNA study on him, they actually found that he had living relatives within that same area where he was found at. And that fascinates me that you can find descendants, from that family 5,000 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all the stuff that they're doing now, the ancestry.com, they send you the kits and, and they can trace you back, find out where you originated. That stuff's interesting, but it's funny, you have a lot of the conspiracy theorists say, oh, no. That's just the government's way of tracking me. So
I do have one problem with those, like 23andMe and I think Ancestry DNA things. I know people that are full-blooded Indian,
mm-hmm.
and it comes back that they're European.
Really?
Yes. Somehow or another, it washed out all of their native ancestry, and I don't know how.
Wow.
I don't know how. I know several people that are full-blooded Indian that have taken them, and it comes back that they're European.
That's interesting.
And I mean, you look at them and you're like, hey, that dude right there is native.
Right.
And I mean, I know people that have they're tribal members. They have tribal cards and everything.
Yeah.
That their ancestry report come back that they are white.
Huh. That's interesting. You'll have to do some research on that. That's real interesting. Henry, are you going to be at any events this year?
Not in 2024, but I'm going to wait until the LBC next year.
You will be?
Yeah, hopefully. Cross my fingers.
Good. Just don't go to Chicago.
No.
Well, this much
I don't think there's no Bigfoot events in Chicago. There's other events there, but not Bigfoot.
No.
What about migration, Henry? Do you think they migrate, or do you think they have kind of like a home area they stay in?
That is a difficult question to answer. I don't personally know for sure. It's a possibility. I look at it as a possibility, but I really don't know for sure. I can't say yes or no that they do or they don't.
What about language? Do you think they have a language, kind of like what Ron and Scott Nelson have been saying?
I don't know. That's interesting. The so-called language. But unless you can prove a Sasquatch made those sounds, it's very difficult to say one way or the other whether or not they do have a language. I think we should concentrate on trying to get one we should concentrate on trying to get one in a study area, get one in a study situation before we go flying off the handle with, oh, they have a language.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. Sometimes I think, theories are all fine and good, but sometimes I think we can get carried away with them.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I spoke with Ron Moorhead a couple weekends ago down at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Festival, and I asked him. There's one part in the Sierra Sounds where he's actually mimicking what he says the Bigfoot's saying, and you can kind of hear him laugh, and I think that's hilarious. But I was talking to him about it, and I said, "Would you do anything different?" He told me yes. He said, "I would have spoken to the Bigfoot." He said, "I think they had something to tell me." So that's kind of interesting in itself. And then I know too, like I said, going back to the natives, the Cherokee Indian said that there was two types of Bigfoot, and one of them actually lived with some of the tribal members and could speak some words of Cherokee.
All right. So Gary, did you see what Mick put up here?
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
And then he backed it up with this.
That's also true, but that's true on both sides of that coin. I think more native women were taken by whites than natives took white women. Actually, kind of going into that a little bit more, if you don't care, European women weren't very useful to natives. Indians were used to women that worked. They would get out, they would tan hides and chew leather, and you know what I'm saying? And that's not things that white settler women did. So they weren't very useful to natives.
That's funny.
Not trying to start a riot or nothing, but call it like it is.
Oh man. All right, let's see here. Henry, what do you think is the most important tool in the research?
Most important tool in the research is, I suppose, definitely a camera. Have a camera with you at all times, because if you're ever in a position to take a picture or a video of one of these things, you should try and make that effort. Even though I realize that cameras are not going, pictures and video are not going to be proof, you can at least have a record of what you have seen if you ever get a chance to see one of these things, because otherwise you just have a story. We have thousands of those.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes I know there are some researchers that kind of backtracked their thoughts as far as proof. Some have said that they don't think we need the proof, that they have seen all they need to see.
Right.
Autumn Williams was one who had made the decision that, proof to the world's not needed. So that's something to think about, because, what would it do? What would the discovery of this do to some industries?
It would destroy it.
You think about the logging industry, what it would do to that.
Yeah. Yep. Logging industry. More area would have to be set aside, protected.
Actually, Billy, if I could hop in on that one too, I honestly don't think the logging industry would be hurt as bad as you would think, because, I'm going to use the spotted owl, for example. You can still go to Lowe's and buy all kinds of lumber. Even though the spotted owl is protected.
Right.
I think the biggest thing that with a legitimate discovery of Bigfoot coming out, would hurt the tourism industry, which is probably one of the biggest industries in the United States. People are not going to want to go to places like Yosemite and Yellowstone and places like that, where you might run up on something that can rip your arms off. I think that would definitely hurt, and a lot of camping and things like that. I think a lot of that would end.
There, Gary. Mick wants to make sure you don't think he's anti-First Nations.
Oh, no. No. I just like to, that's the Indian side of things is something that don't get brought out a lot. And I try to bring it out as, I am part native, and I do try to bring it out because, the United States has been whitewashed for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother, you could look at her and tell she was 100% Indian, but she said there was no Indian in her family. And there was Cherokee and Shawnee in her family because it was an embarrassment for them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
I'm not as quiet as I look.
My family's from all down that way too. I mean, look at the color of my skin.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I'm Cherokee too. So it's everybody down that way, and the majority of people down that way have some part of Native in them, period.
Yeah, I think everybody throughout, the Appalachian Mountains is part Native. Whether they know it themselves or not, that's kind of up for debate.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So Mick says Autumn Williams was a good researcher, but when she suddenly stopped researching and released her book, there were a lot of strange claims in it. Yeah. I'm actually working on reading that book. I'm sure Henry's already read it.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on that book, Henry?
It's interesting, but I don't know how much credibility there is to it.
I think, and this is another thing I remember before I left the research about a decade ago, there was a lot of talk of habituation. And we all know that habituation can be a bad thing. It can turn bad. It's no different than habituating a bear. Eventually the bear is going to get unafraid and rip you to shreds.
Yeah.
So
Take
it's
your door
definitely-
off and come in and see what kind of snacks you got.
Yeah. So it can be a dangerous situation. But see, I think that's where a lot of researchers have a problem with it. It's just simply because the habituator provides proof typically to one person.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want them taking pictures. They don't want them taking recordings. And here it is. And that's all they want. They don't want anybody knowing where they're at or anything. So, everybody out here is wanting proof, and that's, unfortunately, they're not going to get the proof usually from someone that's habituating a creature, because they don't want to. They want to talk about it, but they don't want to out everywhere. So that's a problem. People tend to not believe habituators because they're not presenting proof to the world. So, touchy situation there. And that's kind of what I'm gathering. And I haven't finished the book. I've only went through about a quarter of the book so far. So, anyway. All right. Do we got anything else for Henry? I'll tell you. Yeah, Henry. Hey, what about expeditions? Do you think expeditions do any good?
Well, they find trace evidence. They're good for finding trace evidence. But unless they're going out there to actually bring a specimen back, or, well, the specimen, that's the most important thing. DNA is not going to do it, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And do you think, or why do you think there's no bones found? That's always a question by the skeptics. Why is there no bones found?
Because of the fact that they are, especially the Pacific Northwest, but I don't know about everywhere else, because of the acidic soil, and because of the fact that we have things like porcupines and field mice that eat bones as a calcium source.
Yeah.
I read a study somewhere where they was talking about that with bears. Whenever you have an apex predator that dies off in an area, it only takes about 7 days before that body is completely broken down, eaten. Like he said, porcupines, field mice, squirrels. I've seen deer chewing on bones before. Everything chews the bones for the calciums that's in it. So it only takes about 7 days for something to be scattered like that. And it's different than finding one big pile of bones than it is, hey, there's a bone over here, and then 4 miles over here, there's a bone. And the acidic soil, that's a really good point. Anywhere where you have a lot of forests, you have a lot of acid in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't take long before one gets broken down.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've exhausted all of our questions. You did pretty good, Henry.
Thank you.
One last.
I appreciate
one
you guys.
I got one last
Appreciate
one.
you guys.
Where do you think they live at? Do you think they have a nest? Do they live under the ground? Do they live in caves? Or do you think they just live out in the open?
I think that they live wherever they can. I think they do live out in the open sometimes. Do they make nests? That's a possibility. We have the nests that were found and reported to the Olympic Project, which seemed interesting.
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of people have found different pieces of evidence. I'm not sure how many people watch Expedition Bigfoot. What's your thoughts on that show, Henry?
Interesting show, but I don't think it's going to move the needle any further as far as the research is concerned.
Yeah. I liked some of the technology that they used. I do have to say that, but
yeah,
some of that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the drones. I like the drones idea.
I think that's going to probably do a lot as far as, tracking anyway.
Yeah.
I think Henry brought up a good point. He said we have a lot of trace evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I first started doing this, I was, anytime there was a footprint found, I was like, see, that's proof. That's proof.
Right.
But technically, that's, if you use an evidence-based practice, that is just trace evidence. Hair, tracks, handprints, fingerprints, whatever. That's all just trace evidence. And I do agree with what Henry said. It's going to be a body or a part of a body that brings this, subject to light as far as science goes. Scientists won't take any of us seriously about this until we do actually have a body or body parts.
Yep. Well, Henry, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
We
Henry,
appreciate
it's great to meet you, dude.
coming back.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll see you around at an event here coming up soon.
Hey, maybe so.
Let's see. If you have it, if you, Henry, have any suggestions for guests, feel free to shoot it over to us.
Okay.
We've got a few suggestions. We're trying to get some folks that don't really get out there much, on the show. People that we, many may not hear of. So if you have any ideas, and just shoot them over to us, and we appreciate you coming on the show.
No problem.
Thank you, Henry. And Gary, do you have anything else before we close out the show?
Just, everybody, when you're in the woods, I don't care what you're doing. If you're looking for Bigfoot, if you're out taking a stroll or whatever, be careful. That's the main thing. Summer's coming on. Snakes will be moving. Bears are out, obviously. And there's more dangerous things in the forest than Sasquatch.
Absolutely. There's one more last quick question for you, Henry. Is Russ still managing Bob Gimlin?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. There we have it. Straight from the Bigfoot Encyclopedia. All right, Henry. Thanks for coming on. Thank you for all of our guests that came on here tonight. We appreciate each and every one of you. And again, we remind you all too, if you have suggestions for guests. Matter of fact, I have to mention, one of our listeners has already sent me a list. So I have been working on that list, and we got one coming up next week from that list. So I appreciate it. I just want to let you guys know, I really do try to get the listeners, the guests that you want to hear. So send it, keep on sending them. You can send it to the Facebook page. You can send it to the website, wherever. Don Keating. Yes, that's another good idea. Getting Don back in. I haven't heard from Don in years. So yeah, that's another good idea, Mick. All right. So we want to thank everybody. We will see everybody next week, next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Gary and Henry, if y'all can hang on just a moment, I'll be back shortly. But we will see you all next week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
All right.